The cockpit trembles with a low, familiar vibration, the hum of a modern fighter jet cutting through thin blue air. Inside, a pilot breathes slow and steady, eyes locked on the green glow of his radar display. One contact appears, then two, then a dozen. The screen fills with pings, a swarm closing fast. Instinct whispers the answer: enemy aircraft. Maybe hostile jets, maybe drones, maybe something the briefing missed. His thumb hovers over the weapons selector. Missiles armed, cannon ready. Every muscle tenses for the first shot of a dogfight. But as the horizon sharpens, the illusion cracks. These are not aircraft. No contrails, no turbine signatures. Just vast, dark shapes suspended in the sunlight. At first they look like gliders, impossibly large wings drifting on thermals. Then the details resolve. Membranes stretched between, bone, talons curling, spear-like beaks flashing, pterosaurs. Not fossils in a museum, not images in a textbook. Alive, enormous, and hunting. Their wingspans stretch longer than the jet's fuselage, leathery canopies beating the air with thunder. And there are not one or two, but dozens, layered across the sky like a living storm. The pilot mutters under his breath, a reflex. No way. His computer throws errors, unable to classify what it sees. Bird, drone, unknown, but there's no denying it. The sky has filled with predators that belong to another age, and then the swarm moves. Not clumsy, not scattered, but coordinated. Braking, diving, converging. Shadows race across the canopy as they close the distance. The pilot doesn't have time for disbelief anymore. He pulls the stick, weapons hot. A missile locks, cannon spools. One man, one machine, facing the largest flyers Earth has ever known. Fight begins. 65 million years ago, the skies belonged to the pterosaurs. Not birds, not dinosaurs, but a separate branch of evolution that ruled the air long before the first feathered wings took over. Some were small, darting over ancient lagoons, but others reached scales almost beyond imagination. Quetzalcoatlus, for example, could stand as tall as a giraffe on the ground and stretch its wings wider than many modern fighter jets. These weren't just animals. They were apex predators of the sky. They soared for hours on rising thermals, scanned vast landscapes with piercing vision, and dove with terrifying precision onto prey that never saw them coming. Now imagine a dozen of them aloft at once. Not fossilized skeletons in a museum, not CGI in a documentary. Living, breathing titans, wings slashing through clouds, crests knifing the wind, and beaks longer than a man is tall. For smaller creatures of their age, there was no contest. The sky was theirs. But what happens when the prehistoric meets the modern? Against this flock, we place a single aircraft, a modern fighter jet, loaded with missiles, cannon rounds, and fuel enough for one sortie. Sleek, fast, and bristling with sensors, it is the apex machine of our own time. At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Steel should beat bone. Radar should outthink instinct. A supersonic jet should shred leathery wings with ease. But combat is rarely that simple. Ammunition is finite. Fuel burns quickly, and the sky, even in the jet age, is an unforgiving arena. So, the question stands. Could one modern fighter jet truly handle a dozen pterosaurs in open skies? Or would numbers, endurance, and sheer ancient ferocity overwhelm technology's sharpest edge? The radar tone sharpens, steady, insistent. One target, resolves in the crosshairs. The pilot squeezes the trigger. A missile shrieks off the rail, smoke trailing. Seeker locked on the densest cluster of returns. A flash blooms mid-air. The warhead detonates in the middle of the flock, and the result is instantaneous. One pterosaur vanishes, shredded to fragments, before its scream can even reach the cockpit. Shockwaves ripple outward, and nearby wings crumple under the blast. For a heartbeat, it feels like victory. But the rest don't panic. They scatter. The formation fractures into swirling fragments, each massive flyer veering in a different direction. Some dive steep, vanishing into clouds. Others rise, catching thermals, circling to flank. The sky that seemed full a moment ago now feels like a shifting maze. The pilot rolls the jet and tracks a fresh target. The missile bay is still heavy, but he knows the math. Too many bodies, not enough shots. He flips the selector to guns. The 20mm Vulcan cannon spools with a metallic whine, then roars to life. Tracer rounds tear through the air, glowing lines that rip across the blue. A burst connects. One giant wing shreds like canvas under a knife. The creature spirals, shrieking, before slamming into the ocean below. Another pass, another burst, and a second is torn apart mid-dive. The firepower is devastating, surgical, unstoppable, until the pilot glances at the counter. Dozens of rounds gone in seconds. Each squeeze eats into a supply that cannot be replaced. He has maybe 500 rounds total. At full fire rate, that's less than 10 seconds of trigger time, and he's already burned through precious bursts. Meanwhile, the swarm adapts. The scattered flyers regroup into loose rings, circling like vultures, diving one by one to harass, never presenting a clean cluster again. They force him to turn, to climb, to waste fuel with every maneuver. One missile and a few bursts have claimed kills, but the fight isn't over. The sky is still full of wings, and the jet's advantage, speed and firepower, comes with a clock, ticking down fast. The clash has only just begun. The sky darkens. From above the canopy, shadows multiply. The pterosaurs aren't retreating, they're reorganizing. Dozens fold their wings and dive together, gravity turning mass into speed. The pilot jerks the stick, rolling hard as the first wave slashes past. Claws rake across the wing surface, scraping composite panels but failing to tear through. Another glides too close, its talons screeching across the canopy like knives on glass. The cockpit shudders. Warning lights flicker, then impact. A giant smashes straight into the fuselage, its body disintegrating on steel, but not without consequence. The nose jerks down. The jet trembles. Alarms scream. For a second, the machine feels less like an apex predator and more like prey. The pilot reacts instantly. Throttle to afterburner. The F16 surges, clawing altitude at Mach speeds. The swarm struggles to keep up, wings beating frantically against jet wash. One by one, they peel off, but not before leaving their mark. Blood, bone, and membrane streak. Across the canopy, visibility drops. Now the duel shifts, speed versus agility. The jet can outrun anything alive, but to kill, it must slow, turn, line up shots. Every time the pilot commits to an attack run, the swarm tries to bait him into their tempo. Tight turns, chaotic dives, angles no radar computer can predict. It becomes a dangerous balance. Maintain speed and stay untouchable, or slow down to score kills and risk being swarmed. The pilot knows the clock is ticking, fuel bleeding, ammo dwindling, and the pterosaurs show no sign of fatigue. For every creature shredded, another presses closer, willing to die if it means just one claw connects with steel. The counterattack has begun. The pilot slams the throttles forward. Afterburners ignite, hurling the jet skyward in a near-vertical climb. The G-force crushes his chest, blood dragging toward his boots, but the maneuver works. Half the swarm peels away, unable to match the sudden ascent. He rolls inverted, then snaps into a barrel roll, forcing the creatures to overshoot. One misjudges the turn and collides with another. Both tumble in a tangle of wings. The pilot dives through the chaos and punches past the sound barrier. The sonic boom cracks like thunder, stunning the nearest pterosaurs mid-flight. For a moment, the sky clears. He seizes the window. Missile lock. At this range, it's overkill but necessary. He unleashes a pair of heat seekers into the densest knot of wings. The explosions tear the air apart. Fireballs blooming, leathery bodies ripped to fragments. Feathers, flesh, and smoke scatter in the jet wash. But even as the fire fades, more silhouettes regroup from the edges of the horizon. The swarm isn't broken, not yet. For every predator stunned or burning, others surge back into formation, driven by instincts older than history. The pilot has bought seconds of breathing room, nothing more. Best case, the jet endures. Missiles, cannon, and sheer speed carve through every wing in the sky. The swarm is erased, proof that modern technology reigns supreme. Worst case, the jet is overwhelmed. A single strike to the canopy, a creature sucked into the engine, and the machine spirals down in smoke. Brought low by numbers, not firepower. But the likely outcome lies between. The fighter survives, scarred and battered, fuel nearly gone, ammo spent. The swarm shattered but not without cost. In this sky, technology prevails, but nature forces it to pay for every victory. Alright guys, that's it for today's Sandbox scenario. If you liked this one, you're gonna love the video on your screen, where we throw hundreds of thousands of Mongols up against the modern US military.